Thanks everybody for tuning back in. This is Let's Talk Barcelona, and we're gonna get into this. This is part two, episode 6, part two. Look above here, you'll see the last episode, part one, when we got into the tactics of both Koeman and Barcelona. So in part one, we discussed mainly about the defense and the similarities between pretty much every successful Barcelona team dating back to in 1992. All right, so in this episode, we're gonna get into the midfield and the attackers. Okay, so like we left off, so I'm also gonna want you guys to check out, if you haven't checked out the last episode, then I want you to check the top right hand corner here, at your top right hand corner, and you'll be able to check out the video with your Jordi Cruyff explaining Johan Cruyff's 3-4-3 system and the importance of the players and the movements. All right, so let's get into it. So as per our last discussion in the last video, we know that Barcelona goes to the 3-4-3, which is a fluid 3-4-3 that actually converts into a 4-3-3, a 5-2-3, and all kinds of different formations, just depending on how the players rotate and move between the zones, right? So if you have a what would some would consider a wing back, if you move him up through the zones, he pretty much becomes a midfielder, right? If you move him up further up in the zones, he becomes a winger. That's really all it is. So a fullback really can be a fullback if he stays in a certain zone. He becomes a wing back if he moves further up in the zone, which makes him more of a midfielder. Then he gets into like a winger if he's further up the pitch. So because Barcelona plays with this type of fluidity, the formations per se really don't matter. So one of the things that we're going to get into is the actual 4 in the midfield and 3 in the back. So the reason with the 4 in the midfield, just like Jordi Cruyff explained, you usually have a pivot, holding midfielder that has the ability to control the game. This is your probably your best visionary, best passer, right? So before, under Johan Cruyff, that player was Pep, the Brazilian Emerson, and then Yaya Toure before we get to Busquets. But if you look at all those players, except for Xavi, so Pep, as Jody explained in the last video, Pep would fall back into the center back position if they needed 4 at the back from the 3 at the back. So that would give them 4 at the back when they were defending. Anyone who remembers Yaya Toure also had, Emerson had that ability, but Emerson was there for a short time, and a lot of people probably won't remember Emerson. But Yaya Toure, all of you guys, or most of you guys, should remember Yaya Toure. If not from Barcelona, then you will know him from Manchester City. When he played for Barcelona, the great thing about Yaya Toure is Yaya Toure had the ability, as we know, to play center back. When we won the Champions League, he played center back for one of our injured players, but he really is a holding midfielder. He really is a pivot, right? Same thing as Busquets. Once we realized that Busquets was coming about and Busquets was going to be here to stay, Busquets also played that same position as Pep, where you're in the holding midfield. When we have the ball, you're further up the pitch, but if we lose the ball, you drop back into the center back position. Now, if you look and see, who did we just sign last few years that plays that same position? De Jong. Yeah, and he does what? De Jong has a great ability to play as a holding midfielder or a center back. Do you guys see what's happening here? The thing is, we just don't have all the players to properly play the formation with fluidity, right? Because a lot of the players that we have now are young, so they haven't learned all the positions. Okay, so let's get into some of the positions. So now that we discussed that, so we have the holding midfield position, which is Busquets now, but it should eventually be passed down to De Jong, right? De Jong is the best player for that position because De Jong has the ability to play center back. So playing De Jong in that position is perfect because he can drop back as a center back and he's comfortable there. Eric Garcia, his future might be as a holding midfielder because of his ability to pass the ball, but we just got to wait and see if he can work out as a center back, right? Now, Once we have that position, the holding position there. I'm sure you guys can really see the similarities uh, of Guardiola, De Jong, Busquets. You could see it. You could. I'm sure you guys could just see those similarities there, right? So I'm not going to go into that. So now there's another two in the midfield. We're going to start off with the box-to-box position that Jody explained. Now the box-to-box position, that's the Xavi position for Barcelona right now. On the right side of midfield, you have the box-to-box guy, the person that gets up and down the pitch with lots of energy. Now, lots of energy and getting up and down the pitch doesn't mean you're necessarily the fastest, strongest person. It just means that you have the ability to run for long stints of time. Like you're not going to be tired running up and down, up and down, up and down the pitch. That's what Xavi did. Now, Xavi wasn't the most athletic or physical player, but Xavi still had enough footballing IQ. He knew how to break up the play. He knew how to get, kick people, trip them a little bit during counterattacks to stop the break, get those little clinical fouls, the cynical fouls, right? Xavi was very good at that, along with other players that right? And then I'll explain to you where Xavi actually came in very handy. It was more when we lost the ball, he was very good at that box, at initiating that box to box. Him and Iniesta were very good from the midfield and initiating that press right away, right? These guys could press all day long. Like Xavi and Iniesta could press all day long. But Xavi was more of the box to box midfielder. And now, this is why I say that we're in great shape, because when you have Xavi now, we have Gavi, who's proven both on our team and his brief stint on the national team that he is that type of box to box player. That same Xavi, Koke. What is Rakitic? Rakitic was a box to box player. What is Paulinho? A box to box player. What is Vidal? A box to box player. Do you see any resemblance there, guys? The only difference is that a lot of those guys didn't have the necessary flair that we got accustomed to because of Xavi. But that's just because, like, once again, Xavi is a once in a generational player. So, of course, everybody else is going to look boring compared to Xavi, right? Now we have Gavi. Now, Gavi, remember, he's still young, so we can't expect too much from Gavi because his inability to do certain things, like so Xavi was good at popping up with these crucial goals and making crucial runs late and those type of things and making crucial passes to Iniesta, to Messi, to whoever else was on the team. But we have to allow Gavi the time to develop into that. But as you can see, we have the foundation there with Gavi in our midfield. So those are two of the positions we can see we have very covered. De Jong 24, Gavi 17. They're there for the future. Now let's go to the other side of the midfield. Now the other one was more of an attacking midfielder with the ability to play a bit of a winger. That's Pedri. That's the Iniesta position. That's Pedri, right? So when you have Pedri in that position, now you have an Iniesta, someone who can get out onto the left wing, get into the lane. The only difference between Iniesta and Pedri is that Pedri doesn't score goals like Iniesta. Iniesta always seemed to pop up with goals, like you know what I mean. So that's a part of the game that we have to be patient with Pedri scoring. So we're in a game that back in 2010, Iniesta would pop up with, Xavi would make a great pass to Iniesta, and Iniesta scores. You know what I mean? Messi didn't score, and this person didn't score. It was our two midfielders that scored. But now we're going to be relying on two 18-year-old kids, right? So that's gonna, we're not gonna necessarily see the offensive production from them. So we just have to be patient with them. You know what I mean? What we have to look at is are they doing what Jody Cruyff said they're supposed to be doing? Are they filling the lanes? Are they running? Are they taking the shots? Are they looking for the passes? Are they seeing the passes? Right now at their age, we can't just judge them on are they doing everything correctly because they're too young, they're inexperienced, they need time to grow. So what we have to do is are they looking, are in the right position, were they thinking right? And this is what we have to judge as opposed to the overall final end product. Like, so all right guys, so I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Like, subscribe, leave comments, and have a good day, everybody. Viva Barca. And if you know, you know, and if you don't know, you just don't know.